Emily Carter had never liked babysitting at night. It wasn't the children that bothered her. Most kids were easy. Give them a movie, a snack, and tell them bedtime was at 9. The problem was always the houses. Large houses. Quiet houses. Houses that made sounds when no one was moving. Tonight's job was exactly that kind of house. The Harper family lived at the very edge of town, where the streetlights stopped and the forest began. Emily had taken the job because she needed the money. College tuition was getting harder every semester, and babysitting paid better than the cafe where she worked part-time. At exactly 7:30 p.m., she parked her small blue car in front of the Harper house. The house was enormous, 3 stories tall, old white wood walls, tall black windows, and a porch light that flickered slightly in the cold autumn wind. Emily stepped out of the car and wrapped her coat tighter. Something about the house made her uneasy. But she told herself the same thing she always did. It's just a house. She walked up the wooden steps and rang the doorbell. A moment later, the door opened. Mrs. Harper stood there smiling politely. She was dressed for a formal dinner, wearing a dark blue dress and pearl earrings. "Emily, right?" she said. "Yes, ma'am. Come in." Inside, the house was warm. The smell of cinnamon candles filled the air. Mr. Harper appeared from the living room, putting on his coat. "Thanks for coming," he said. "The kids are already asleep." Emily blinked. "Asleep already?" Mrs. Harper nodded. "Long day at school. They passed out early." "That makes things easy," Emily said with a small laugh. Mr. Harper walked toward the door. "We should be back around midnight." Mrs. Harper grabbed her purse and then paused. "Oh, one more thing." Her voice lowered slightly. "The children are sleeping upstairs in the 3rd floor bedroom." Emily frowned a little. "3rd floor?" "Yes," Mrs. Harper said quickly. "Their regular room is being renovated." Emily nodded. That seemed normal enough. But something in Mrs. Harper's tone felt strange. Almost nervous. Mr. Harper opened the door. "We'll see you later." And just like that, they were gone. Their car disappeared down the long driveway. Emily was alone. The house became quiet almost instantly. Too quiet. Emily walked into the living room. A large television sat in front of a comfortable couch. Perfect. She kicked off her shoes and sat down. Babysitting jobs like this were the best kind. Kids asleep. Parents gone. Easy money. She turned on the TV and flipped through channels. A crime documentary was playing. Perfect background noise. After about 20 minutes, Emily had almost forgotten she was babysitting. Then the phone rang. A loud, sharp ring that echoed through the house. Emily jumped slightly. She laughed at herself and picked up the phone. "Hello?" Silence. For a few seconds, she heard nothing. Then a man's voice spoke. Low, calm, almost whispering. "Have you checked the children?" Emily froze. "Excuse me?" Click. The call ended. Emily stared at the phone. Probably a wrong number. Or someone messing around. She shrugged and returned to the couch. But something about the voice stayed in her mind. It had sounded too calm. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. Emily hesitated. Then she answered. "Hello?" The same voice. Soft. Slow. "Have you checked the children?" Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "Who is this?" Silence. Then, click. The line went dead again. Now Emily felt uneasy. Maybe someone was prank calling. But how did they know she was babysitting? She stood up and walked toward the kitchen. The house creaked slightly as she moved. The old wooden floor made small cracking sounds under her feet. She poured herself a glass of water. Relax, she thought. It's nothing. But then something strange happened. Above her, she heard a sound, a faint creak. From upstairs, Emily slowly looked toward the staircase. The house had 3 floors. The children were sleeping on the 3rd. And just for a moment, she wondered if maybe she should check on them. Then the phone rang again. This time, the sound felt louder. More aggressive. Emily walked slowly back to the phone. Her heart was beating faster now. She picked up the receiver. "Hello?" The voice returned. But this time it sounded closer. Almost like the person was smiling. Why haven't you checked the children yet? Emily's blood turned cold. And somewhere above her, on the third floor, a floorboard creaked. Slowly, Emily stood frozen beside the phone. Her fingers were still gripping the receiver long after the line had gone dead. The silence inside the Harper house suddenly felt heavier. Almost like the house itself was listening. She slowly placed the phone back on the table. Her eyes drifted toward the staircase. The staircase that led to the second floor. And above that, the third floor, where the children were sleeping. Emily swallowed. Stop being ridiculous, she told herself. Old houses make noises all the time. Wood shifts. Pipes creak. Wind pushes against the walls. But deep inside, another thought kept whispering. What if someone is actually up there? Emily grabbed her phone from the couch. No new messages. No missed calls. She checked the time. 8:12 p.m. Only 40 minutes had passed since the parents left. It already felt like hours. Emily tried to distract herself. She turned the TV volume up a little louder and sat back down. The documentary narrator spoke calmly about an unsolved murder case. Not the best choice of entertainment tonight. She flipped channels. Nothing good. The silence between the sounds of the TV seemed to stretch longer and longer. Then, the phone rang again. Emily jumped. Her heart began pounding immediately. The sound of the ring echoed through the empty rooms of the house. She stared at it. Don't answer it. But after the fourth ring, curiosity won. Emily picked up the phone. Hello? For a moment, nothing. Just faint breathing. Slow. Quiet. Then the same voice returned. Low. Whispering. Emily? Her stomach dropped. He knew her name. How do you know my name? She asked. The voice ignored the question. Have you checked the children? Emily's skin crawled. Who is this? Silence. Then the man spoke again. Go check them. Click. The call ended. Emily felt a cold wave move through her body. This wasn't a prank anymore. How could someone know her name? Unless. Her eyes slowly moved toward the staircase again. The staircase looked darker now. The hallway light above it flickered slightly. Emily stood up. Her breathing felt shallow. Okay, she whispered to herself. I'm just going to check on the kids. She grabbed a small flashlight from her bag. The beam of light cut through the dim hallway. Step by step, she walked toward the stairs. The first stair creaked loudly under her weight. The house felt different up here. The second floor hallway stretched long and quiet. Family photos lined the walls. Pictures of the Harper family smiling at beaches, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Normal life. Normal people. But tonight the house didn't feel normal. Emily slowly walked down the hallway. Every step made the wooden floor complain softly. Halfway down the hallway, she heard it again. A sound. Above her. From the third floor. A faint dragging noise. Like something moving slowly across the floor. Emily stopped. Her heart began racing again. Hello? She called softly. No answer. Only silence. The staircase to the third floor stood at the end of the hallway. Dark. The light upstairs was off. Emily pointed the flashlight toward the top. The beam barely reached the upper landing. For a moment, she thought she saw something move. But when she blinked, nothing was there. She forced herself to climb. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Each step creaked loudly in the empty house. When she reached the top, the air felt colder. Much colder. The third floor was smaller than the rest of the house. A short hallway. 2 doors. One slightly open. That must be the children's room. Emily slowly approached the door. Her hand trembled slightly as she pushed it open. The flashlight beam swept across the room. 2 small beds. A nightstand. A window covered by thin curtains moving gently in the wind. The children were there, sleeping peacefully. Emily sighed in relief. See, she whispered. Everything's fine. She stepped closer to check them. The little boy on the first bed was curled under a blanket. The girl in the second bed hugged a stuffed bear. Both breathing slowly. Completely safe. Emily smiled. She turned to leave the room. But just as she stepped back into the hallway, she heard something behind her. A sound from inside the room. A quiet whisper. Emily? Her entire body froze. Slowly, very slowly, she turned around. The children were still asleep. But the closet door in the corner of the room was now slightly open. And inside the darkness of that closet, something moved. Emily stared at the closet. Her flashlight beam trembled in her hand as the light landed on the narrow crack between the closet doors. The door had definitely been closed before. She was sure of it. Now it was open just a few inches. Just enough for darkness to spill into the room. Emily held her breath. The children were still sleeping peacefully in their beds. The little boy turned slightly under his blanket and let out a quiet sigh. Everything looked normal, except the closet. Emily tried to think logically. Maybe it was never closed. Maybe the wind from the window pushed it open. But the window was on the other side of the room. And the air was completely still. She slowly took a step toward the closet. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath her feet. Her flashlight beam moved across the door again. Nothing moved inside. "Hello?" Emily whispered. Her voice sounded very small in the dark room. No response. Just silence. She took another step closer. Now she was only a few feet away. The darkness inside the closet looked thicker than the rest of the room. Like it was swallowing the light from her flashlight. Emily raised the flashlight higher and pushed the closet door open a little more. The hinges made a slow creaking sound. The beam of light revealed hanging coats. A few cardboard boxes on the floor. A pair of children's boots. Nothing else. Emily let out a nervous breath. "Okay," she whispered. "You're imagining things." She turned to leave the room again. And that's when the phone rang. The sound echoed loudly from downstairs. Emily jumped. Her heart started pounding again. The ringing continued. Once, twice, 3 times. It sounded louder than before. More urgent. Emily looked once more at the children. Still sleeping. She quietly stepped out into the hallway and closed the bedroom door halfway. Then she began walking back toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than before. The 3rd floor suddenly felt colder. When she reached the staircase, she paused. Something about the silence felt wrong. Like someone was standing somewhere in the house. Listening. Waiting. Emily quickly shook the thought away and went downstairs. The phone was still ringing. She hurried into the living room and grabbed the receiver. "Hello?" This time the voice didn't whisper. It sounded amused. "You checked them." Emily's blood froze. "How do you know that?" she asked. A quiet chuckle came through the phone. "I told you to check." Emily's voice shook. "Who are you?" The man ignored her again. Instead he asked another question. "Did you look in the closet?" Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Her fingers tightened around the phone. "How do you know about the closet?" Silence. Then, a slow breath on the other end of the line. "You should look again." Click. The call ended. Emily stared at the phone in disbelief. Her mind raced. How could he possibly know about the closet? There was only one explanation. Someone had to be watching her. Inside the house. Her eyes slowly lifted toward the ceiling. Toward the 3rd floor. The house felt darker now. Even the TV noise couldn't make the silence feel normal again. Emily grabbed her phone. Her hands were shaking as she dialed 911. The operator answered quickly. 911, what is your emergency? Emily tried to steady her voice. I think someone is inside the house. The operator's tone became serious immediately. Ma'am, can you tell me your location? Emily gave the address. My name is Emily Carter, she said quickly. I'm babysitting here and someone keeps calling the house. What did the caller say? The operator asked. Emily hesitated. He knew my name, and he told me to check the children. A brief pause. Where are the children now? Upstairs, on the 3rd floor. Another pause. Then the operator said something that made Emily's stomach twist. Ma'am, stay where you are. Officers are on the way. Emily exhaled slowly. Thank you. But before she could hang up, the operator spoke again. Emily, I need you to answer one question. Yes? When the caller told you to check the closet, Emily felt her heart beating faster. Yes? The operator asked quietly. Did you check behind the coats? Emily's mouth went dry. No. There was silence for a moment. Then the operator spoke again. Slowly, carefully. Emily, I want you to leave the house right now. Her heart stopped. Why? The operator's voice dropped to a whisper. Because the calls are coming from inside the house. And at that exact moment, from the third floor, Emily heard the sound of footsteps. Running. 4. The call from upstairs. Episode 4. Footsteps in the dark. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the ceiling. Fast, heavy, moving across the third floor. Emily's blood ran cold. She gripped the phone so tightly her fingers hurt. Emily? The 911 operator said urgently. Are you still there? Yes, Emily whispered, barely able to breathe. Listen carefully, the operator said. Officers are already on the way. They should arrive in a few minutes. A few minutes. That suddenly sounded like forever. The footsteps upstairs stopped. The silence that followed felt worse than the noise. Emily slowly turned toward the staircase. Her body was screaming at her to run. But her mind froze on one terrifying thought. The children. They're still upstairs, she whispered. The operator spoke quickly. Emily, do not go back up there. But the kids. Emily, the operator interrupted firmly. Leave the house immediately. Emily's eyes stayed locked on the staircase. Every horror movie she had ever seen flashed through her mind. This was the moment people made the wrong choice. The moment they went back upstairs. The moment they didn't make it out. She took a shaky breath. Okay, she said quietly. I'm leaving. She placed the phone on speaker and kept the line open as she slowly moved toward the front door. Every step across the living room floor sounded too loud. The house creaked softly around her. Behind her, the television still played quietly, the narrator's calm voice completely unaware of the terror inside the room. Emily reached the door, her hand wrapped around the doorknob. Just a few more seconds and she would be outside. Safe. Then, a sound came from upstairs. Not footsteps this time. A child's voice. Soft. Sleepy. Emily? Emily froze. It was the little girl. Emily, the voice called again. Her heart twisted. The operator heard it too. Emily, the operator said urgently, do not go back upstairs. But Emily's hand slipped off the doorknob. The little girl sounded scared. Emily, someone's here. Emily's heart stopped. Stay in your room, Emily shouted toward the ceiling. No answer. Only silence. The operator's voice became sharper. Emily, officers are less than 2 minutes away. Get outside now. But Emily couldn't move. Her mind was filled with the image of 2 children alone on the 3rd floor. Alone with whoever was inside the house. Emily, the operator said again. But it was too late. Emily had already turned toward the stairs. She grabbed the heavy fireplace poker from beside the couch. It felt cold and solid in her hands. I can't leave them, she whispered. Then she began climbing the stairs. The 2nd floor hallway looked darker than before. The family photos on the wall seemed to watch her as she walked past. Her flashlight beam shook as she pointed it toward the 3rd floor staircase. The top of the stairs disappeared into darkness. Emily tightened her grip on the poker. Hello? She called softly. No response. She climbed the 1st step. Creak. 2nd step. Creak. 3rd. 4th. Every sound seemed to echo through the house. When she reached the top, the hallway was completely silent. The children's bedroom door was now wide open. Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She was sure she had left it half closed. The flashlight beam slid slowly across the floor. Nothing moved. She stepped toward the room. Kids? She called quietly. No answer. She pushed the door open. The room looked exactly the same. 2 beds, nightstand, window. But something was wrong. The little boy was still asleep. But the girl's bed was empty. Emily's heart dropped. Hello? She whispered. Then she heard something. A small sound. From inside the closet. A faint scratching noise. Like something moving slowly against wood. Emily slowly turned her flashlight toward the closet. The door was open wider now. Darkness filled the space inside. Then, a small hand reached out from the darkness. It was the little girl. Her eyes were wide with fear. She whispered one sentence. "He's still in here." And behind her, something inside the closet began to breathe. Emily's flashlight beam shook violently. The small hand of the little girl stretched out from the darkness of the closet. Her fingers were trembling. "He's still in here," she whispered again. Emily's heart felt like it might explode in her chest. "Come here," Emily said softly. The girl slowly crawled out of the closet. Her face was pale. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Emily quickly pulled her close and moved her behind her. "Stay right behind me," Emily whispered. The little girl nodded silently and clutched the back of Emily's sweater. Emily raised the fireplace poker slightly. Her flashlight beam slowly moved toward the inside of the closet. The light revealed hanging coats first. Then the floor, boxes, shoes. But the back of the closet was still swallowed in shadow. "Is anyone there?" Emily called. Her voice echoed slightly in the small room. No answer. Only silence. Then, a slow sound. Breathing. Deep. Heavy. Coming from inside the closet. Emily felt every muscle in her body tighten. The little girl squeezed her sweater harder. Emily forced herself to take a step closer. The flashlight beam pushed deeper into the closet. The coats swayed slightly as she brushed past them. And then the light revealed something. A pair of shoes. Large black boots. Standing perfectly still in the darkness. Emily's blood froze. Her flashlight moved upward slowly. Legs. Dark pants. A tall figure pressed against the back wall of the closet. The man had been standing there the entire time. Watching. Waiting. His face slowly appeared in the light. Pale skin. Sunken eyes. And a smile that stretched too wide. Emily gasped and swung the poker forward. The man moved suddenly. Fast. Too fast. He lunged out of the closet. Emily shoved the little girl behind her and swung the poker again. The metal rod slammed into the man's arm. He let out a sharp grunt and stumbled back. "Run!" Emily shouted. The little girl sprinted toward the bedroom door. The man's eyes snapped toward her. "No," he growled. He lunged again. Emily stepped between them and swung the poker with all her strength. This time it struck his shoulder. The man crashed into the wall. Emily grabbed the girl's hand. "Go!" They ran into the hallway. The little boy was still inside the room. Emily stopped suddenly. "I have to get him." The girl cried, "No." But Emily rushed back into the room. The boy was still sleeping through the chaos. Emily grabbed him quickly and lifted him into her arms. The little girl waited at the door, terrified. "Come on," Emily shouted. They ran into the hallway together. Behind them, the closet door slammed open. The man stepped out, his face twisted with anger. "You shouldn't have done that," he said calmly. Emily ran toward the stairs. The children's footsteps pounded beside her. The third-floor staircase felt longer than before. Behind them, the man began walking. Not running, just walking. Slow, confident, like he knew they couldn't escape. Emily reached the second floor and rushed down the stairs toward the front door. The little girl clung to her hand. The boy stirred slightly in Emily's arms. "Emily?" he murmured sleepily. "We're leaving," she whispered. They reached the living room. The front door was only a few steps away. Then, the phone rang again. The sound exploded through the room. Emily froze for half a second. From the staircase behind them, the man's voice echoed calmly. "You should answer it." Emily didn't stop. She reached the door and threw it open. Cold night air rushed inside. But just as she stepped outside, she heard the sound she had been praying for. Police sirens. Growing louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the trees at the end of the driveway. Emily ran toward them with the children. Behind her, inside the dark doorway, the man stood watching, smiling, and slowly raising the house phone to his ear. Then the line on the phone in Emily's hand went dead. Emily ran across the dark driveway with the two children. The cold night air burned in her lungs as she sprinted toward the flashing red and blue lights. The police car slid to a stop in front of the house. Two officers jumped out immediately. "Over here," Emily shouted, her voice breaking. One of the officers rushed toward them. "You're safe now," he said, taking the little boy from Emily's arms. The other officer crouched beside the little girl. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, still shaking with fear. Emily turned back toward the house. Her entire body trembled. The front door was still open. Darkness filled the entrance. But the man who had been standing there was gone. "Where is he?" Emily whispered. The officers quickly drew their weapons. "Stay back," one of them said. They moved carefully toward the house. Another police car arrived seconds later. Then another. Within minutes, the quiet street was filled with flashing lights. 3 officers entered the house. Emily sat on the curb with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The little girl sat beside her. The boy had finally woken up and was crying softly. "Emily," the girl whispered. "Yes? He was watching us before you came." Emily felt her stomach twist. "What do you mean?" The girl looked down at her hands. "Sometimes at night, we heard someone walking upstairs." Emily looked back at the house. "Did you tell your parents?" The girl nodded. "They said it was the house making noises." A few minutes later, one of the officers came back outside. His expression was serious. "We searched the house," he said. Emily stood up immediately. "Did you find him?" The officer shook his head. "No one inside." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible. He was in the closet," she said. "And he chased us down the stairs." The officer nodded slowly. "We believe you." Another officer walked out carrying a small evidence bag. Inside the bag was something dark. Emily leaned closer. It was a black glove. "Where did you find that?" she asked. "In the closet," the officer said. Emily's stomach dropped again. "So he was there." "Yes. But he's gone now." Emily looked back toward the house again. Her eyes moved slowly across the dark windows. Something about the building still felt wrong. "Is there another way out?" she asked. The officer hesitated. "We're checking the basement now." Emily frowned. "Basement?" "Yes," he said. "Access is through a door in the kitchen." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. She had been in the kitchen earlier. She had never noticed a basement door. The officer continued speaking. "These older houses sometimes have tunnels or crawl spaces." Emily's heart started beating faster again. "Are you saying he could still be under the house?" Before the officer could answer, another voice shouted from inside. "Officer!" Footsteps rushed toward the front door. One of the officers ran out quickly. "You need to see this." Emily stood up again despite the blanket around her shoulders. "What is it?" The officers looked at each other. Then one of them spoke. "We found something in the basement." Emily's heart pounded harder. "What?" The officer swallowed slightly. "A phone." Emily blinked. "What?" "A phone line connected directly to the house phone." Emily's stomach dropped. "That's how he called." The officer nodded. "But that's not the strange part." Emily's voice shook. "What do you mean?" The officer held up a small notebook they had found downstairs. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes. Times, dates, descriptions. Emily stepped closer. One of the pages had a name written at the top. Her name, Emily Carter. She felt the world spin slightly. "How long has this been here?" she whispered. The officer answered quietly. "According to the notes." He flipped to the first page. "About 3 weeks." Emily's blood ran cold. She had only accepted the babysitting job 2 days ago. Which meant one terrifying thing. The man in the house had been planning this long before she arrived. And somewhere in the dark woods behind the Harper house, a branch snapped. The sharp snap of a branch echoed from the dark woods behind the Harper house. Emily turned her head immediately. The officers heard it too. Flashlights swung toward the tree line. The woods behind the house stretched far into darkness, thick with tall trees and tangled undergrowth. One officer lifted his radio. "Possible movement behind the property," he said. 2 officers began moving slowly toward the woods, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Emily felt the little girl grip her hand again. "Is he out there?" she whispered. Emily didn't answer, because deep down, she knew the answer. One of the officers turned back toward Emily. "You and the kids should stay in the car." Emily nodded and led the children toward the nearest police cruiser. Inside, the warmth of the car felt unreal after the cold night air. The little boy had fallen asleep again, his head resting against the seat. The girl stared silently out the window. The flashing police lights painted the trees red and blue. Emily's eyes stayed fixed on the woods. Two officers disappeared into the darkness. Their flashlights bounced between the trees. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then the radio on the dashboard crackled. A voice came through. "We found footprints." Emily leaned forward instinctively. "What did they say?" the girl asked quietly. Emily shook her head. "I don't know yet." Outside, another officer spoke into his radio. "Are they fresh?" The response came back through static. "Very fresh." Emily felt her stomach twist again. The man had just run into the woods. He was still close. Very close. Minutes passed. Then the officers emerged from the trees again. One of them shook his head. "He got away," he said. Emily felt both relief and fear at the same time. Relief that he wasn't inside the house anymore. Fear that he was still out there somewhere. Watching. Waiting. Another officer walked over to the police car where Emily sat. "Miss Carter," he said gently. "We need to ask you a few questions." Emily stepped out of the car. The cold air hit her again immediately. The officer opened a small notebook. "You said the man called the house multiple times?" "Yes. And he knew your name." Emily nodded. "And he told you to check the children?" "Yes." The officer wrote something down. "Did you recognize his voice?" Emily shook her head. "No." "Have you ever seen him before tonight?" "No." The officer looked thoughtful. "Then there's something we don't understand." Emily frowned slightly. "What?" The officer turned the notebook around. On the page was a copy of the note they had found in the basement. Emily's name written at the top. Below it were several lines of writing. Emily Carter. Age. 20. Works at Maple Street Cafe. Car. Blue Honda Civic. Emily's heart skipped. "How does he know all that?" she whispered. The officer looked just as confused. "That's what we're trying to figure out." Emily suddenly remembered something. "My car." The officer looked up. "What about it?" "I parked it outside earlier tonight." The officer turned toward the driveway. Emily followed his gaze. Her blue car sat exactly where she had left it. The officer walked slowly toward it. Emily followed a few steps behind. He pointed his flashlight toward the driver's side door. Then he stopped. "Miss Carter?" Emily felt a chill again. "What?" The officer slowly moved the flashlight upward. There was something on the window. Scratched into the glass. Emily stepped closer. Her breath caught in her throat. 3 words had been carved into the window. Deep. Fresh. Still sharp. The words read, "I see you." Emily's heart began racing again. The officer turned slowly toward the dark woods. Somewhere beyond the trees, a faint light appeared for just a moment. Like the glow of a phone screen. Then it disappeared. Emily couldn't take her eyes off the words scratched into her car window. "I see you." The letters were deep and jagged, carved into the glass with something sharp. Her reflection stared back at her through the damaged window. The officer ran his fingers just above the scratches without touching them. "This was done recently," he said. Emily's stomach twisted. "While I was inside the house?" The officer didn't answer right away. But his silence was enough. Emily slowly turned her head toward the dark woods again. Somewhere out there, the man was still watching. The same officer lifted his radio. "Possible suspect still in the tree line. Everyone stay alert." More officers spread out around the property. Flashlights scanned the trees. But the woods were thick and deep. A person could hide there for hours. Emily wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. The little girl stepped out of the police car and stood beside her. "Emily," she whispered. "Yes? I saw him before." Emily looked down at her quickly. "What do you mean?" The girl stared toward the house. A few nights ago. Emily's heart started pounding again. Where? The girl pointed slowly upward. Outside my window. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. Your window? On the 3rd floor? The girl nodded. He was standing in the trees. Emily felt a wave of fear wash over her. How long has this been happening? The girl shrugged slightly. I don't know. Did you tell your parents? Yes. What did they say? The girl looked down. They said it was probably just someone walking their dog. Emily turned back toward the house. The 3rd floor window looked down at the dark woods behind the property. From there, someone could watch the entire house. Watch the children. Watch anyone who came inside. Emily suddenly remembered something else. The notebook, she said to the officer. What about it? The note said 3 weeks. The officer nodded. Yes. Emily pointed toward the woods. So he's been out there the whole time. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he looked back toward the trees again. Another officer walked over. We searched about 50 yards into the woods, he said. Footprints disappear after that. Disappear? Emily asked. Ground gets rocky further in, the officer explained. No clear tracks. Emily shivered. The idea of the man moving silently through the forest made her skin crawl. The officer closed his notebook. We'll keep patrol units around the area tonight. Emily nodded slowly. But what if he comes back? The officer looked toward the house again. We'll make sure the family installs a full security system. Emily glanced up at the 3rd floor window again. Something about it made her uneasy. The curtains moved slightly in the wind. For just a moment, Emily thought she saw something behind the glass. A shadow. Standing there. Watching. Her heart skipped. Did anyone go back inside? She asked suddenly. The officer frowned. No. Emily pointed toward the window. I think someone is upstairs. 2 officers immediately turned toward the house. Flashlights pointed toward the 3rd floor. Everyone stay here, one officer said. They moved quickly toward the front door again. Emily's eyes stayed locked on the window. The curtain shifted once more. Then, a hand pressed slowly against the glass. From the inside, Emily's heart stopped. The hand pressed against the 3rd floor window looked pale under the flashing police lights. Fingers spread slowly across the glass. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Emily whispered, "There's someone up there." The officers turned immediately. Flashlights shot toward the 3rd floor. Inside the house, one officer shouted. 2 officers rushed toward the front door again, weapons drawn. Another officer grabbed his radio. Possible suspect still inside the residence. Emily felt the little girl grip her arm tightly. Emily, she whispered. Emily couldn't look away from the window. The hand was still there, pressed against the glass. Then slowly, it moved, sliding downward across the window, leaving a faint smear behind. The curtain shifted again, and the shadow disappeared. Inside the house, the front door slammed open as officers rushed back in. Their footsteps echoed through the quiet building. Emily held her breath. The minutes that followed felt endless. Red and blue lights continued flashing across the trees. The woods behind the house remained silent. But the 3rd floor, that window, Emily knew what she had seen. Another officer stayed outside with her. You're sure it was a hand? He asked. Emily nodded. Yes, someone was standing there. The officer frowned and looked up at the window again. No one should be inside. A minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. Finally, the front door opened again. One of the officers stepped outside. His expression looked confused. Emily rushed toward him. Well? She asked. Did you find him? The officer shook his head slowly. There's no one up there. Emily stared at him in disbelief. That's impossible. I saw someone. The officer looked uneasy. We checked every room. The closets. The attic crawl space. Everything. Emily's voice shook. Then who was at the window? The officer didn't answer. Instead, another officer walked out behind him holding something in a clear evidence bag. A small object. Emily leaned closer. It was a phone. Not a house phone. A cell phone. Old. Scratched. The officer spoke quietly. "We found this on the 3rd floor." Emily felt another chill. "Whose phone is it?" The officer shook his head. "We don't know yet." Emily stared at the phone inside the plastic bag. The screen suddenly flickered on. All the officers noticed at the same time. The screen lit up with a new message. The officer carefully opened the bag and looked at it. His expression changed immediately. Emily felt her chest tighten. "What does it say?" The officer slowly turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a single message. Sent just seconds ago. The message read, "I'm still inside." Emily's blood turned to ice. Then, behind them, from inside the house, a door slammed loudly on the 2nd floor. The sound of the door slamming echoed through the entire house. Every officer outside froze. Emily felt her heart jump into her throat. "He's still inside," she whispered. The officers moved instantly. 3 of them rushed back through the front door. Another officer grabbed his radio. "Suspect still inside the residence. All units respond." Emily stood near the police car, unable to move. The little girl held her hand tightly. Inside the house, footsteps thundered across the wooden floors. Officers shouted commands. "Police, come out now." Silence followed. Then, a loud crash. Glass shattered somewhere upstairs. Emily covered her mouth. The officer beside her spoke into the radio again. "2nd floor window broken." Emily looked up just in time to see something move. A shadow. A man climbing out of a window. He dropped from the 2nd floor onto the grass behind the house. "Backyard," an officer shouted. Flashlights swung toward the back of the property. The man ran. Fast. Straight toward the woods. Police officers chased after him immediately. Emily watched the beams of their flashlights disappear between the trees. The forest swallowed them quickly. The night grew quiet again. Only the distant shouts of officers echoed through the darkness. Minutes passed. Emily's heart slowly began to calm. Then, from the woods, a voice shouted, "We got him." Emily felt her knees weaken slightly. Relief washed through her. More officers appeared from the tree line. They were dragging a man between them. His clothes were dirty, his face pale under the flashing lights. Emily felt the air leave her lungs. It was the same man from the closet. The same hollow eyes. The same terrible smile. But now the smile was gone. He looked tired, almost calm. The officers pushed him against a police car and placed handcuffs on his wrists. One officer searched his pockets. They pulled out a small knife, another phone, and a folded piece of paper. The officer opened the paper carefully. His expression darkened. Emily stepped closer. "What is it?" The officer hesitated. Then he showed it to her. It was another list. Names, addresses, photos, babysitters. Emily's name was only one of many. Her stomach turned. "He's been watching babysitters," she whispered. The officer nodded slowly. For a long time, Emily looked at the man again. He was staring straight at her now. Not angry, not afraid, just staring. Then he spoke. His voice was the same one from the phone. Low, calm. "You weren't supposed to leave the house." Emily felt a chill run through her body. The officer shoved the man into the back of the police car. The door slammed shut. For the first time that night, the house behind them felt quiet again. Safe, or at least safer than before. An officer walked over to Emily. "You did the right thing," he said. "You saved those kids." Emily nodded slowly, but something still bothered her. "The phone message," she said. "What about it?" Emily looked at the evidence bag again. The message still glowed faintly on the screen. "I'm still inside." Emily frowned. If he was outside in the woods, who sent the message? The officer's expression changed slightly. He slowly looked back toward the dark house. The windows were black again. Silent. Still. Then, from somewhere inside the house, the phone rang. One long, echoing ring. And everyone outside turned slowly toward the door.